All right, get ready because today's deep dive is a special one. We're taking your request to heart and doing a deep dive into the life of Jesus, but trust me, we're going way beyond the usual.
We are, and honestly, that's one of the most fascinating aspects of the Urantia book. It gives us these glimpses into moments that other historical accounts just kind of gloss over.
Exactly. We're talking about the Wednesday before the crucifixion.
A day full of, well, you wouldn't believe it if we didn't have the Urantia book to tell us.
Seriously, contrasts everywhere you look. So picture this. It's Wednesday, right?
The traditional day of rest.
Jesus and his apostles, they're camped out just outside Jerusalem. You'd think, okay, peaceful, right?
You'd think. But the Urantia book paints this picture of, it's not so much peaceful as it is just strangely quiet.
Almost heavy, you know?
Like that feeling you get right before a storm breaks. And you can tell, even Jesus, he picks up on this vibe.
And you know he would. The Urantia book talks about how perceptive he was. It even mentions how he encourages his apostles to think back on what they'd experienced since they got to Jerusalem and to brace themselves for what's coming. He knows things are about to get intense.
Which, come on, talk about a leadership lesson right there.
Yeah.
Even with everything weighing on him, he's still looking out for his people, you know?
Absolutely. Trying to get them ready. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Urantia book tells us about this, well, you could almost call it a turning point for one of the apostles. And it involves John Mark, the one who ends up writing one of the Gospels.
Oh, this is a good one. See, Wednesday for John Mark is a big day.
Okay, now you've got to tell me more. What happens?
Well, everybody else is kind of wound up, anxious, right? But John Mark, he's got this, youthful eagerness about him.
I can almost picture it.
He's not afraid to ask the tough questions.
Oh.
He really wants to understand. And I think Jesus sees that, recognizes that genuine desire.
He does. The Urantia book mentions how they actually end up spending the whole day together. Just the two of them.
They even head out for a walk in the hills. Apparently, John Mark was thoughtful enough to pack a lunch basket.
That's such a great detail. It really brings it to life. But while they're off having this amazing one-on-one time back in Jerusalem, well, let's just say the mood is a little different.
Understatement of the century. The religious leaders, they're having a little meeting of their own.
And it's not exactly to discuss their favorite parts of Jesus' teachings.
No, not exactly. They're feeling pretty threatened, to say the least. His message is shaking things up, and they are not happy about it.
Which, to be fair, has been the reaction of pretty much every established power structure to, well, just about anything that challenges it since the beginning of time, right?
History definitely has a way of repeating itself, doesn't it?
So we've got Jesus and John Mark taking a walk, talking about, well, life, right? And meanwhile, back in the city, things are about to get a whole lot more complicated.
Yeah, talk about a study in contrast, right? But, what gets me about the Urantia book is how it gives us these little glimpses into their conversation. It's not just like, oh, and they chatted. We actually get some insight into what they talked about.
Okay, so spill it. What kind of things did they discuss on this walk?
We'll get this. They were comparing childhoods.
Hold on, I need a minute to process this. Jesus and John Mark, talking about what it was like to be a kid. That's not something you hear every day.
Right. And it's not just small talk either. They get into some pretty deep stuff about family and upbringing.
I bet. I mean, those are some pretty fundamental aspects of who we are, right? What kind of things did they talk about?
Well, they talk about the importance of having a loving home, which, makes sense. But here's where it gets interesting. They also touch on how sometimes even parents' love can be, well, maybe a little misguided.
Oh, I know that one. Good intentions. But sometimes it doesn't quite work out the way we hope. But why bring that up with John Mark?
Because, check this out. The Urantia book actually says that Jesus used John Mark's parents as a positive example.
Really? What did he say?
He actually points out how they were able to strike this balance between love and wisdom in how they raised John Mark. They didn't shower him with material things or try to shield him from the world,
It's so easy to want to protect your kids from everything, but sometimes that backfires.
Exactly. And Jesus actually suggests that this kind of upbringing, letting John Mark have his own experiences, make his own choices, it was actually crucial to him developing a strong sense of self.
It makes you think of that saying, give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. It's like Jesus was advocating for that kind of empowerment even in childhood.
Yeah, that's a great comparison. And it goes even deeper than that. The Urantia book suggests that Jesus wasn't just talking about individual growth here. He was implying that this kind of solid foundation at home, where kids are nurtured but also empowered, it's actually the foundation for a better world.
Wow, okay. That's powerful stuff. Makes you wonder if that message is more relevant than ever, right?
No doubt about it. But while they're having this incredibly profound conversation back at camp, the other apostles are, well, they're not exactly radiating tranquility.
More like radiating where did he go and what's going to happen.
Pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
They're restless, anxious. You can practically feel the tension mounting.
And then there's Judas. This is where his story takes that heartbreaking turn.
It's a good reminder that even in a group as close as the apostles, there were still so many different paths, different struggles.
Absolutely. And it's so easy to just write Judas off, right?
Mm-hmm.
Slap that label on him, the betrayer. End of story. But the Urantia book, it doesn't let us off that easily, does it?
Nope. It actually gives this much more nuanced picture of him. It talks about how he started out with good intentions, but then started feeling this growing resentment. Like he wanted more recognition, more power.
It's almost like you can see those human flaws that we all have, you know?
Yeah.
The ambition, the insecurity.
Exactly. And the Urantia book even says that Judas was terrified of being associated with a movement he thought was doomed to fail.
So he starts looking out for himself, which unfortunately leads him straight to the high priests. You know, the ones who wanted to get rid of Jesus.
Oh, yeah, the same ones. And this meeting, it wasn't just about the money, like some people say. The Urantia book makes it clear that Judas was driven by this, toxic cocktail of resentment and fear.
Wounded pride, fear. It's amazing how those emotions can really cloud our judgment.
It's a classic tragedy, isn't it? The way that resentment and fear can lead us down a path we never thought we'd take.
It's hard to even imagine, you know, being in that position, betraying someone like that. So Judas is back at the camp, and you have to wonder what must be going through his mind. And then on the flip side, you've got Jesus coming back from this incredible day with John Mark.
And he knows, right? Jesus senses that something is off the second he gets back.
Oh, absolutely. The Urantia book talks about this almost palpable shift in the atmosphere.
Like you could cut the tension with a knife. The apostles are on edge, anxious. And what's interesting is that Jesus, he doesn't shy away from it.
He acknowledges it.
Oh, yeah. He acknowledges the elephant in the room, but then he does something totally unexpected. He's like, all right, everybody, dinner time.
He throws a dinner party in the middle of all this.
Well, not a party exactly, more like a Last Supper.
Wait, this isn't the Last Supper, is it?
Good catch.
Yeah.
No, the Urantia book makes a point of saying that this is a different meal. This is like a Last Supper before the Last Supper.
Wow, that just adds another layer to everything, doesn't it? Like he's really trying to, I don't know, savor these last moments with them.
Absolutely. And the Urantia book even describes Jesus as being almost, well, maybe a little too cheerful. Like he's trying so hard to comfort them, Which, let's be honest, probably just made the whole thing even more unsettling for everyone.
It's like when you try to hide something from someone you love because you don't want them to worry. It comes from a good place, but it doesn't always work out as planned.
Exactly. And then as the evening winds down, Jesus, he just looks at them and he says, "Go to sleep, my brethren." Just like that.
Wow. Knowing everything that was coming.
Right. It's such a powerful reminder that even in the face of, well, the unimaginable, there's still that capacity for love, for peace.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If you were John Mark, sitting there, knowing what we know now, what would you have asked Jesus that day? What wisdom would you have wanted to carry with you?
It's a question worth pondering. And, maybe in that pondering, we find our own connection to something bigger than ourselves, something that helps us navigate those tough times.
This deep dive has been incredible.
It really has.
We set out to explore the life of Jesus, and the Urantia book, it gives us this perspective that's so different, so human.
It's those little details, the conversations, the emotions. That's what makes it so real, so relatable, even thousands of years later.
It reminds us that these stories, they're not just about Jesus. They're about us, the challenges we face, the choices we make.
And most importantly, that power of love and compassion, that's a message that never gets old, does it?